Welcome, everyone, to the Human Subjects Research 101 talk. My name is Jackie Langdon. I am a research program manager at the Johns Hopkins Healthy Aging Studies Unit. I've been working in research, both basic bench research, as well as clinical research for over 35 years. Today, I'm going to share with you some of the basic concepts of human subjects research, regulatory, and also practical aspects to consider during study development. So, as a brief introduction, you're likely here because you're planning on applying to the AITC for funding. Some of these slides will be directed specifically towards the timelines involved there, but other folks may be looking. There are just basic concepts to consider when you're doing and planning human subjects research. In terms of the AITC pilot funds, be aware they're awarded for developmental efforts or feasibility testing of AI and tech that may improve the health and well-being of older adults. And note that clinical trials are not eligible for these funds. You'll see a link embedded here. I have embedded these throughout the talk so that you can take a deeper dive as we just will go across some broad concepts. And each of these links will be available at the end as well. So today I'm going to start with the definition of human subjects research, give you a broad, very brief history of why our regulations are what they are, and give you an idea of what an institutional review board is and what it does. Then I'll switch gears a little, talk about considerations to make when you're thinking about recruitment and some of the resources we have available here and you would have through the AITC application. We'll go over the application timeline in respect to some of the concepts we talk about and how those fit in. I'll take questions at the end. There should be plenty of time for that. In the meantime, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and Weicker will be monitoring that, and she may answer some directly or some she may stop and I will answer in real time. All right, so what is human subjects research? So the Office of Human Subject Protection created decision charts to help us determine if something is human subjects research. Essentially, here's the link again. I'm gonna, try to have those on most slides. But out of this link, I have just pulled out the boxes that pertain to most of you. If you're applying for an AITC pilot, you're likely going to need people, older people, to determine whether your invention, device, intervention is working for old people. So it will likely be human subjects research. A systematic investigation to develop or contribute to general knowledge. Yes, you're going to have a living individual helping you determine these things. You won't have biospecimens likely, but you will have information that you'll analyze. And so therefore, that's where I'm going to convince you that you are probably doing human subjects research. All right, so some basics about human subjects research. If you are doing it, it will require a institutional review board approval. The institutional review board, IRB for short, which is what I'll probably say the rest of the time, will review the protocol, which will have to give the involvement of human subjects, explain what you propose to do. You have to include an assessment of risk, outline steps you'll take to mitigate any risk. Also tell them what the potential benefits of the study are to the subject, to society at large, the importance of the knowledge that'll be gained from these studies. Also note, any principal investigator or study team member who participate in human subjects research must complete IRB compliance training. I will touch on that and provide some linkage. What is exempt human subjects research? So say you're still doing human subjects research, but you think you might not need all the approvals. You might be exempt. And so this chart goes over the exemptions there are 8 of them. And again, the details, if you'd like to follow up on these, are in this link, and again, will be provided at the end. But I'm going to call your attention to exemption 4. Exemption 4 talks about de-identified data. So many of you may think, I don't really need to know who the people are that are in this research. Maybe maybe my protocol can be exempt because my data is de-identified. I'm just going to call your attention to what is actually considered de-identified data, or rather what is not. So you might be surprised to know that any geographic subdivision smaller than a state, if you have the person's zip code, they're considered identifiable. All elements of dates except year of the individual, birthdays, date of death, so forth. If the person's over 89, even their year of birth is considered identifiable, and you're asked to group them in a cohort 90 and above, so as not to identify them. Contact information like telephone, email, social security, things that probably sound like make sense to you, but license plate numbers, vehicle identifiers, all considered identifiable. Finally, any kind of biometric identifiers, finger voice prints, full photographic images. And I want to note here that exempt status must be confirmed by the IRB. And I'll give you an example that Anne shared with me regarding exemption status. That she had an applicant that was using a technology that was focused just on the eyes, and the IRB actually felt that that was still identifiable. There was a chance that there could be a birthmark or a tattoo or some identifying mark that the person would still be identified just from their eyes. So I think hopefully I've convinced you that you're probably not going to get away with having an exempt status IRB, and we're going to have to go through all of the regulatory processes that make sure that research is safe for human subjects. All right, a brief history. Why? Why do we have to do that? Well, this started in 1947, that when the Nuremberg Code was as such named from the Nuremberg trials, which was the verdict of the Nazi war criminals. The judge outlined the following principles: that human subjects research must have voluntary informed consent, a favorable risk-benefit analysis, and the individuals must have the right to withdraw. His verdict, handed down in 1947, became what's known as the Nuremberg Code. These principles you will still see today as you do your training or read consent forms and so forth. They have stayed. In 1964, the World Medical Association, under the Declaration of Helsinki, built upon these principles and expanded them. Then the US Congress noticed that there were some practices in research that they did not think were legit, and they commissioned the Belmont Report, which came out in 1974, and it outlined the following requirements of human subject research: the principles of respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. More recently, the Code of Federal Regulations was published in 2018. Title 45, Part 46, governs human subjects research and IRBs, and helps the government through that have oversight of what's going on in human subjects research. All right, so who is an IRB? What are they? Okay, so an IRB must have 5 members with varying backgrounds, and they must be able to adequately review research activities. They could be qualified to do this through experience or their expertise. One member has to have the primary concern of the scientific areas of the protocol, and one member has to have a primary concern that is non-scientific. The body should include a diverse group of people, race, gender, cultural backgrounds, and there should be sensitivity to community attitudes. The goal here is to promote respect for the advice and counsel. We don't want a group of scientists sitting around discussing with each other why they think this is a great idea without the input from the community members who might have a slightly different idea. So by making this a diverse group with different areas, it is meant to respect and help everyone feel comfortable. All right, the Institutional Review Board, the goal is to assure protection of rights and welfare of human subjects. They will review the study protocol as well as the informed consent document, any brochures, recruitment-related material, study assessments, and documents. They will look over everything you intend to do. The IRB workflow can look quite intimidating. This is the workflow for the Johns Hopkins IRB, which I've just highlighted some of the areas. So you'll start with researcher prep. This is an electronic application, an eIRB. The PI must submit it online. Once you've submitted the IRB, there'll be a pre-IRB review. The IRB staff look over your application and make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. If they are, it goes on. The committee meets, the IRB meets weekly. There are 7 Johns Hopkins Medicine IRBs. Again, this is specific for Hopkins, and we'll get into a little if you're not at Hopkins, what happens. Then you'll be waiting your outcome. And this can take 6 to 8 weeks to get your first review back, depending on how fast this portion goes. And I think the consensus with the study coordinators that I've talked with is you're really unlikely to be approved after your first review. They're going to come back and ask you for some things. And what I'll say is once they come back and tell you to fix something, you have 60 days to respond. So you can come back in here and they'll say, hey, you forgot this. And then you make a response, you go back here. They say, yes, you got everything. And you go down to wait, or they say, oh, you forgot this, and you can go back here. So this is iterative, depending on how many times you have to go through here. It can take that 6 to 8 weeks, and when the committees are meeting and when you get your responses in and how busy they are, how many applications they have. So you'll be waiting the outcome, and then one of 3 things can happen. You can say, yay, you did it. You met all of the requirements and you'll get an approval letter. They can come back and say, okay, post-IRB, the committee members want the following questions answered, which is fine. Then you have these 60 days and you can come back in. It'll go back into pre-IRB review. Or occasionally, they may just not approve your protocol whatsoever. If that's the case, you've kind of got to start from scratch and come back to researcher prep and put in a new application, not a revised version of this application. Between revisions, it's about 4 weeks. The only way you can make this go faster is to respond to the reviewers quicker. You don't have any control over how fast the IRB works, but you can respond and get your clarifications back to them quicker. All right, so a little more about IRBs here. At Johns Hopkins, which is the one I just went over, you're required to submit to the Johns Hopkins IRB if you work here. Doesn't matter what the funding source is, doesn't matter the location of the study. If Hopkins faculty and staff are involved, it must go through the Johns Hopkins IRB. There are occasions where they may allow an independent IRB to be the IRB of record, but this requires a written agreement. For non-Johns Hopkins folks studies, that your institutional review board will depend on where you're located. If you're in an academic institution, your home IRB will be the IRB of record. If you're non-academic and perhaps so you don't have access to an academic institutional review board, you can go through a commercial review board such as Advara, the Study Coordinating Center. The Coordinating Center of the AITC will help determine on a case-by-case basis where your IRB would go if you're non-academic. Here I'd like to mention also although I won't go into a deep dive, if you're going to complete your study at more than one place, say between two universities, or for instance, if there are there are multiple sites, you have to have a single IRB, which covers, that's called a reliance agreement. And again, we've given you the link here to take a deeper dive on that. Not going to go into it here. Just be aware if you plan or propose to use multiple locations, you will have some additional regulatory hoops to jump through. I mentioned the IRB compliance training earlier for all principal investigators or staff working in human subjects research. Here, we've listed the link to what Hopkins requires. The basic classes are human subjects research. This is administered through a third-party city. There's a conflict of interest and commitment training. There's something called researchers, also administered by city. It's previously known as health privacy, or HIPAA for research is essentially what it is. And then there's a clinical research billing orientation, and this is just for the PI and study team members who will obtain consent. I'm going to note down here, if you're a non-JH individual, but you're going to be working with us, in order to go through these trainings, you will first complete a reliance survey, and that will walk you through how to get your training. Again, the link is here and also at the end of the talk. All right, I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit. I've gone through some of the regulatory aspects of doing human subjects research. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the recruitment aspects and how we can support that if you're an AITC applicant. And I'm pause for a minute. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them on the regulatory part. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Actually, Jackie, I do have a couple of questions that came in, and they both have to do with de-identified data.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, what if the de-identified data is subsequently encrypted in a manner that it cannot be associated with the user?
So always I will defer to the IRB folks, but in my experience, you have to convince them how you're encrypting it. Again, this is with my experience doing some stuff with them. You think, well, I'm not going to pass that information on, but they want to know how. So it's possible, but you're still going to have to go through the IRB to have them give the final clearance of how it's encrypted.
Thank you. And the second question is, could you please discuss de-identified versus anonymized data?
I don't know if I don't think I can do that. I'd have to look up what the difference is. I've never heard things in terms of IRB regs, how that means. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just not in my experience. I can certainly imagine that we make things, it could be that the coordinators know it, but then the people doing the analysis, it's de-identified to them. But the point that I've had made to me in the past from the IRB, there's still a linkage. And that linkage exists. And so maybe that's the difference between truly de-identified and anonymized. I can't speak to that terminology exactly, but that is a distinction that has been made in some of the applications that I've dealt with. Even when we're not sharing that data, somebody in the group does have a link to who is who.
Thank you. Those are the only questions so far.
Okay, great. So again, now we've gone through some of the regulatory parts. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Johns Hopkins Healthy Aging Studies Unit. That's where I'm located. We are the epicenter of clinical research on aging at Johns Hopkins. We do things like regulatory compliance, listed last, and what we just went over, but we also do study recruitment, scheduling. We do the assessments, we collect the data, take care of the data entry, storing, and management. These are things that we have staff that can help you with these things. And this is a resource that's available when you do apply through the AITC. Okay, the who. I'm going to go over some of the study design and associated costs. The who of study design, I won't give you costs specifically, but I want you to be aware that while we have these resources and you make these decisions about study design, nothing is free. And so it comes with the more complex, the more costly, so to speak. So the who of study design. How many participants will be enrolled in the study? Pretty basic. Sometimes it'll be a statistical reason you pick that number, but we'll need to know how many. Who's the target of the study population? This is important. It could be healthy older adults, frail older adults, the Alzheimer's disease or related dementias patients, or it could be caregivers of any of these individuals. And it's important to know who your targeted population is. Who is that technology going to help? Because that's who you need to enroll to prove that it'll work and to have that feasibility and testing done. We need to keep in mind that we need to include individuals from diverse backgrounds when we're doing our recruitment. It's important to consider all your inclusion or exclusion criteria. Do you want a certain age? Do you want a certain mobility status? Do they need to be able to walk on their own, or do they need to be able to walk with assistance? That will help us determine how hard it will be to find the people that you're looking for. The cognitive status is important. It helps determine how consent is completed, and it also will be particularly of interest with the AD-ADRD applications. So some of the recruitment resources we have at the Healthy Aging Studies Unit for applications that are geriatric or age-related conditions, we have an aging registry, which is a database of adults over 65 years old who live in the Baltimore area, and they have already agreed to participate in research as a whole. They've expressed an interest. They're not obligated to complete any study, but they have given us permission to call them, reach out to them. The registry enrollment includes about, 15 pages of information, but for example, information we have already recorded for these folks, basic demographics, their body mass index, their mini mental status exam scores, whether they're frail or not, disease burden, medicines, the list goes on. We have a huge amount of information, and that helps us hone in on inclusion, exclusion criteria, and what I call sort of fishing in a stocked pond for the people that you want in your study. For applications focused on the AD-ADRD folks, the recruitment strategies will be handled on a case-by-case basis with the help of the pilot leaders. Considerations include how the cognitive function will be defined. As I mentioned above, we do take MMSE scores, but perhaps that's not what you want. You might want a MoCA score, or you may want a physician diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. These things will be important to know in designing recruitment. And then we'll have to think about informed consent based on these cognitive scores or diagnoses. Okay, so where will the study activities be conducted? This I've moved into back to study design, the associated costs, moved on from the who your target population is, to the what and the where. So where are you going to have your study completed? Could be on site at Johns Hopkins. We have clinical research space in Healthy Aging Studies Unit. There are other places at Hopkins that you could do your research. It could be offsite at another location. Your research can be done totally remotely as well. I will just bring back, if you're looking at multiple universities or multiple entities doing your research at places, you may have to go back and do that reliance agreement, have a single IRB for all the to satisfy all the locations. Depending on where things are located for your study and who you're recruiting, you should consider providing transportation or parking. When we recruit individuals at a bare minimum, we try to, make it as easy for them as possible. Can they park out front? We have individuals who have limited mobility. Sometimes lift rides are a good consideration depending on your population. These are all things to consider in terms of how many people you're recruiting and how much it will cost to get them into the site that you've chosen. How many study visits are required? What's the duration of each visit? Both of these considerations go into what kind of compensation we might give to the individuals for participating. The IRB reviews that as well. They don't want it to be coercive. They want it to be appropriate. And you need to include that in your budget. Okay. Finally, what's the duration of the study? In this instance, that is also about participant burden in terms of number of visits and the duration of the visits and what you're asked to do. But duration of the study is also important for these AITC pilots because you have about a 1-year funding time period. And by the time you get started, you can't have a study that lasts for longer than a year, and you have to consider the lead-in time to get the IRB and the recruitment started and the end time to get the analysis done. So you have to consider your study duration fitting in the window of the funding period. All right, so here we posted the deadlines for the AITC applications. The link again is at the bottom here. If you're listening today, chances are perhaps you're planning on that round 1, March 1st to April 30th application cycle. If you're chosen, you'll come back for round 2, and then that cutoff is July 30th, and the funding is scheduled for fall of 24. So how do these activities that we just went through, how do these activities fit into this timeline? So here we've created a schematic just to try to explain that, a way to think about this. On the top, you have the dates that we talked about in the previous slide, with the idea also that finalists between round 2 and before the awards happen are about in September of 24. So during round 1 and round 2, you're going to have a budget. You're already going to have to know what the possible awards are and how you intend to spend it. That budget development will probably be a process between round 1 and round 2, trying to help you hone in and narrow in on all of the considerations that the reviewers have and so forth. By the time you've reached round 2 and you've been selected as a finalist, your IRB is going to have to be moving, because you can't have the money awarded for recruitment until you have an IRB approval. Now, if it's a technology development award only, it can be started before the IRB approval if that's the first portion of your budget. But again, you'll see a pretty tight timeline at the end, especially considering the flow of the IRB that I explained. It will be prudent to stay on top of that and have that going. All right, here are the related resource links that I promised throughout the talk. Again, I think this will be posted. You'll be able to get to it and can share it with anyone that requests it. And that wraps it up. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Jackie, we have a question now. If the company is located at a distance from Bayview, can we assume that we can pay a staff member to perform participant-related tasks? For example, a home visit for assessment.
Yes. I mean, I think that is definitely one of the resources we would offer. We have staff on site. Ann and I work closely together as applicants are come in and are moved to the later stages. And we try to make sure we have staff available that can do things, and we help with all those considerations, build into your budget what it would cost to support that staff member to do those visits or interventions or collect that data. Yes.
Another question that was asked that I actually answered, but might be valuable to say out loud. Folks in the audience were wondering if we're located at Bayview. And I did say yes, both the AITC and the Human Aging Studies program are here at the Bayview campus. And then there are some links in the Q&A towards more information on de-identified data. And a new question, Jackie, for you. Do you work with study participants living in nursing homes or assisted living?
We have not worked with nursing home participants. Everyone who is in the aging registry is a community dwelling adult. Assisted living is probably somewhere in the middle. Like, we definitely go into senior housing, but not skilled nursing facilities. I believe that requires a separate level. It's not that it can't be done, but it will require, in terms of recruitment, you'd have to work with the skilled nursing facility to get those approvals, and the Hopkins IRB. And we just don't do that on a regular basis. Doesn't mean you can't, it's not what we do typically.
Thank you. Are JH affiliates favored for this program, or are other companies eligible?
Well, Anne, you probably should answer that.
Thank you, Jackie. JH affiliates are not favored. In fact, this is the 4th grant year for this program. And in the past 3 years, we've had a varied portfolio of funded pilots. By that, I mean about 1/3 are from Johns Hopkins, 1/3 are from industry, and 1/3 are from other universities. So that is very purposeful. We look to have a variety of funded pilots. We're as interested in working with small companies as we are with university researchers. I would recommend that if you are applying from a small company and you have never done human subjects research before, not only should you pay close attention to everything Jackie has provided today, but you should also reach out to us to try to partner with a researcher here at Johns Hopkins. And that person will likely not be on the AITC team, because our role at the AITC is to provide support and consult. But a Hopkins researcher would actually be part of your study team to assist with the human subjects research portion of it. So that was a little bit more information than you asked for, but hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions? I don't see new ones in the box, but I'll wait a couple minutes to see if anybody types in anything. Okay, there is now a question. Could you please provide a link for more information on the program and funding opportunity? And actually, that was in Jackie's slide with the due dates and the resources. And again, these slides can be sent to you after the webinar. Just reach out to me. I'm actually going to put my email address in the, actually, I think, Jackie, you have it on your slide, don't you? There we go. So you can reach out to me at this email address. I'll be happy to share Jackie's slides. This session has also been recorded and will be posted on our AITC website. And one more question, is there a list of people who could partner with a small company? We do not have that list posted, but we do have a working list. So I would certainly encourage you, if you are intending to submit an application, email me and I can start connecting you with possible study team members for your group. As you probably know already, the first application is almost like a letter of intent. It's not a lot of detail. It's a brief abstract describing your proposal. And if it is selected to go to formal application, that's the point when your study team can be detailed more, and the budget can also be a little more detailed. How many years are funded in this program? So we are going into year 4, and it's a 5-year program, and we intend to seek renewal of the application. Any other questions? I think that might be it.
All right. Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jackie. This was wonderful.
All right. Good luck, everyone.